Dear delegates, may I ask you to take your seats? We are ready to resume the sessions. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now resume the 11th meeting of the COP. I invite parties to return to agenda sub-item 2F, organization of work, including for the sessions of the supervisory bodies. As a result of a proposal from parties received by the Presidency, a draft decision is presented for adoption by the COP that includes recognition of non-party stakeholders and the Marrakesh Partnership and the continuation of the mandate of the high-level champions. I invite the COP to adopt draft decision entitled Climate High-Level Champions as contained CP/2024/L.15. Thank you. I invite parties to turn to agenda item 8, matters relating to finance, sub-item A, long-term finance. At the resumed first meeting of the COP on Monday, 11 November, a contact group co-chaired by Medellin Diouf and UEFA Salmi was established. I also appointed a senior member of my delegation to undertake presidency consultations on this item. I invite the COP to adopt the draft decision contained in document CP/2024/L.14. Thank you. I invite the COP to consider agenda item 14, gender and climate change. This matter was considered by the SBI. At its plenary meeting on 16th of November, the SBI agreed to forward this matter to the COP for further consideration. At the resumed fifth meeting of the COP on Monday, 18th November, I invited Marc-André Lafrance and Roulette Thomas to facilitate discussions on this matter. I also appointed members of my delegations to undertake presidency consultations on some elements. I invite the COP to adopt the draft decision contained in document CP/2024/L.12 with following oral amendment. Paragraph 23 will be replaced by the following text. Encourages the Secretariat to consider making sure that all budget proposals have considered effects on gender equality in its own organizational structure and to appoint gender local points in relevant departments, provided this does not add to the overall cost but increases efficiency. No objection. Thank you. I invite parties to turn to agenda item 19, other matters. Would parties like to raise any other matters? Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. Mexico's statement is thanks to a message on the previous item. We'd like to welcome the process for reviewing the Lima Work Programme, which has been improved particularly with the 10-year extension and the roadmap for the design of the Gender Action Plan for 5 years. Nonetheless, Mexico was hoping that the principle of no backsliding would be upheld in this. That was complied with, but there still needs to be effort made that we're all still pulling together to see made. We'd like to share that Mexico was hoping that there would be a strengthening of the human rights framework and commitments related to the going beyond the Paris Agreement so that we could uphold the right to a free, healthy and sustainable environment. We think it's very important to include specific language to recognize specific human rights, such as the right to food, the right to be free of violence, access to land, and access to resources, as well as women's rights and the rights of human rights defenders. Mexico will be working with country partners, parties to the convention, in order to be able to bolster those elements in the future, and we hope that we will be able to continue promoting the inclusion of women in climate action. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Presidency. The Africa Group would like to welcome the outcome on gender and climate. This is a critical and important decision to help UN processes, its constituted bodies and parties to advance their efforts on achieving gender balance, women participation and empowerment. However, Presidency, we would like to raise concerns on how the process is moving towards introducing new and controversial terms that are not related to climate change, such as women in their diversities, intersectionality, and gender and data analysis. We also want to emphasize that this agenda item should remain under the Convention and ensure that there is provision of financing to support gender and climate change activities based on common but differentiated responsibilities, and ensure that developed countries provide financing and other means of implementation to developing countries to support the agenda and climate change initiatives. We also want to express our disappointment on the absence of dedicated financing to support the implementation of the Lima Work Programme on gender and its action plan, as countries continue to use minimal financing availed by their national governments, who already have constrained fiscal capacity to support gender initiatives. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your statement. Peru, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I speak on behalf of ILAC. We welcome the adoption of the decision on gender and climate change, and we sincerely appreciate the flexibility shown by all parties in reaching this decision. The extension of Lima Work Programme is vital for ensuring that gender-responsive considerations and the empowerment of women and girls are systematically integrated into climate policies and actions. As we look ahead, our next task is to start working on our Gender Action Plan for adoption in COP30. ILAC looks forward to continuing working with all parties to deliver this shared goal in Belém do Pará. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The Lima Work Programme on Gender is a critically important element of our work in the UNFCCC. The continuation of this work program remains a core priority for Canada. While we are relieved that the decision was adopted tonight, we are disappointed that the outcome does not bring us further than when it was first adopted 10 years ago. This work stream must speak to the realities, challenges, and opportunities of the future. And as our colleague from Peru has just said, we now need to work together to develop a gender action plan that reflects these challenges and opportunities. Hearing previous statements, I am again reminded just how much work we still must do to keep gender front and center on our collective agenda. Canada will continue to make gender a core priority of our work in the UNFCCC process, and at COP, we encourage all delegations to work with us to truly advance gender equality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We simply wanted to add our voices to the previous interventions. I would like to associate with Peru on behalf of ILAC and also with the intervention from Mexico and others to underline and to highlight the importance of the decisions that we have taken today. We also express our appreciation for all the work that many delegations invested in this text. At the same time, we would have liked to have a more ambitious outcome, especially with regard to the activities around the gender decision and also in the provision of means of implementation, which we believe will be essential in order to achieve more ambition at the local level and the national level. We are convinced that the gender approach is absolutely central in any climate policy and any climate endeavor. And this is going to be especially important as we are developing our NDCs. We invite everyone to continue working, and as Peru was saying, to aim high and try to get as much as we can and make sure that the gender approach is fully applied in all our policies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. I invite parties to turn to agenda item 19, other matters. Would parties like to raise any other matters? No request. I now suspend this meeting of the COP. I now resume the 11th meeting of CMP. I invite the CMP to consider agenda item 13, other matters. Would parties like to raise any other matters? Thank you. I invite parties to turn to agenda 14, conclusion of the session. The preliminary assessment of the resource implications of decisions adopted by the governing bodies at this session were provided at the end of the COP meeting. The draft report is contained in document CMP/2024/L.2. I invite the CMP to adopt the draft report on the understanding that the reporter, with the assistance of the Secretariat, will complete the report and make it available to all parties. Thank you. I now adjourn this meeting on CMP. I now resume the 11th meeting of the CMA. I invite parties to turn to agenda sub-items 11A, new collective quantified goal on climate finance. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024/L.22.
Cuba, you have the floor.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, President. The Republic of Cuba is grateful for the efforts made and the hospitality demonstrated by the government of Azerbaijan in the hosting of this conference in a complex context. While we recognize the value of the agreements reached in various areas, the Cuban delegation profoundly regrets the insufficient outcomes obtained regarding climate finance. I would like to make clear the fact that it does not agree with the new quantified goal on climate finance. The scope of the decision adopted demonstrates the lack of agreement between our developed country partners in the face of the global panorama of climate change, and reflects a clear intention to renounce their responsibilities, which have been historically and legally shouldered and recognized in the Framework Convention and the Paris Agreement. A climate finance historically and legally shouldered and recognized in the Framework Convention and the Paris Agreement. A climate finance which in no way directly or indirectly aims to convert developing countries through finance to the necessary level that needs to be provided by developed countries. It undermines the Convention and the Paris Agreement. It increases the flow of resources from the south to the north in a continued dynamic of environmental colonialism. The new finance goal, as it stands, does not respond to the minimum requirements that have been laid down, and in no way will lead to an improvement in the situation. The pledge of 300 billion.
Several such unfortunate incidents that we have seen of in not following inclusivity, not respecting the positions of countries. We had informed the Presidency, we had informed the Secretariat that we wanted to make a statement prior to any decision on the adoption. However, and this is for everyone to see, this has been stage managed, and we are extremely, extremely disappointed with this incident. Your Excellency, trust is the basis for all action, and this incident is indicative of a lack of trust, a lack of collaboration on an issue which is a global challenge which is faced by all of us, and most of all by the developing countries that are not responsible for it. But we've seen what you have done. However, would want to say that gaveling and trying to ignore parties from speaking does not behove the UNFCCC's system, and we would want you to hear us and also hear our objections to this adoption. We absolutely object to this unfair means followed for adoption. We are faced with one of the biggest challenges of all times, which will determine our existence. The only thing that enables us to move beyond and undertake action in line with addressing this challenge is collaboration and trust among us. It's a fact that both have not worked today, and we are extremely hurt by this action of the Presidency and the Secretariat. The one thing, the trust that there will be action by those who can take action. Developed countries have the wherewithals to take action. They should agree to advance their net zero objectives, the goals, and become net negative soon thereafter. But there is also trust that financial resources, technology and capacity building, the means of implementation, the essence of any climate action is required, and that is required by the developing countries. This will enable those who want to take the action and who want to survive in this changing climate world, but are not able to do it because they need the support of the developed countries, and we seek trust in that. And I'm sorry that we need to make concerted efforts to do this, because clearly what's happened today is not any indication of this. Trust that we understand each other. We understand each other's constraints. Trust that we will move together, whatever it may be, for a better future. Unfortunately, the paper on the NCQG that has been proposed does not speak or reflect or inspire confidence and trust that we will come out of this grave problem of climate change. Excellency, we have worked together, not for 1, not for 2, but 3 years on this, to have a mandate before us, and to implement the mandate provided by the COP29 decision, para 53, to set the new collective quantified goal. The goal was envisioned and decided to be set in the context of the needs and the priorities of developing countries, and based on the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibility. Both are fundamental to the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. This is the essence of our collaboration. This is the only basis for coming to a UN body where all of our countries can together discuss and arrive at solutions to address climate challenges that we all face. The developing countries are most impacted by climate change. In addition to our development priorities, we have to contend with the additional stresses and crises of climate. The global south is being pushed to transit to low-carbon pathways, even at the cost of our growth. We have to face the CBAM measures. There are other measures that are being imposed by developed country parties to make the transition really not easy. In fact, it's quite difficult to enable such a transition in a very, very competitive, hostile environment that we are facing at the moment. The COP29 decision on NCQG was in the light of inequitable impacts of climate change on developing countries, the increasing threat of these impacts, and the need to finance the evolving needs and priorities. We are disappointed with the outcome, which clearly brings out the unwillingness of the developed country parties to fulfill their responsibilities. As we struggle to deal with climate change, the outcome proposed in the paper will further affect our ability to adapt to climate change, greatly impact our NDC ambitions and its implementation, and create further challenges to our resilience, and above all, will severely impact growth. India does not accept the goal proposal in its present form. Developed countries taking lead for a mobilization goal of a mere sum of $300 billion, and that too to be reached only by 2035. That's almost 11 years later. And that too from a wide variety of sources. So it would have to be private, it would have to be multilateral. And there are large amounts of it which will be left for the developing countries to mobilize themselves. The goal is too little, too distant. It is 2035, it's too far gone. Our 2030 estimates tell us that we need to do it at 1.3 trillion per year till 2030. But we have only been agreeable to have, or we have a proposal that talks about $300 billion mobilization goal. It does not address the needs and priorities of developing countries. It is incompatible with the principle of CBDRC and equity. Regardless of our battle with impacts of climate change, it is a fact that developing countries are accused continuously of emissions, forgetting the high per capita emissions of the developed countries, forgetting also the historical responsibilities of the developed countries. This only adds to the problem at hand for us, and the proposed goal shall not solve anything for us. In fact, we have to implement ambitious NDCs and economic challenges that we need to navigate and address the adaptation needs. The amount that is proposed to be mobilized is abysmally poor. It's a paltry sum. It is not something that will enable conducive climate action that is necessary for the survival of our country and for the growth of our people, their livelihoods. And I'm sorry to say that we cannot accept it. Excellency, the current text's paragraphs 8A, 8C, and 9 are highly problematic for us. This little commitment has been further qualified by a footnote. We know that recapitalization of MDBs is a matter that has remained unaddressed. And in that situation, we know also that in times to come, if we participate, developing countries will be and are going to be the major contributors for financing climate action through this 8C. Counting finance mobilization through MDBs into the overall goal is not a progression from 100 billion goal, but is a deflection of the responsibility of the developed countries towards developing country shareholders of the MDBs. Excellency, I regret to say that this document is nothing more than an optical illusion. This, in our opinion, will not address the enormity of the challenge we all face. Therefore, we oppose the adoption of this document. We oppose the adoption of this document. India opposes the adoption of this document, and please take note and regard of what we have just said from the floor of this room. We seek
Thank you for your statement.
We seek a much higher ambition. We seek a much higher ambition from the developed countries, and which does not seek support. The ambition that exists at present of 300 billion is actually seeking support of the developing countries, and that is such an unacceptable fact. It is not right that you should expect that from a developing country, and the developed countries are happy to say that we should be contributing to that effort. I'm sorry, we are not happy. We are very unhappy, disappointed with the process, and object to the adoption of this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. Statement will be reflected in the report. I invite parties. Oh, sorry. Bolivia, you have the floor.
Gracias. Thank you very much, President. The plurinational state of Bolivia would like to express its solidarity with the delegation from India, and would like to support that position to request the rejection of this decision. India has expressed the need to strengthen equity in these climate negotiations, defending the right of millions of peoples to live in dignity in the context of an unfair international context. This is not possible. Climate finance, as agreed in this COP, does not meet the requirements of developing countries. And it consolidates an unfair system where developed countries do not step up to their legal obligations to provide finance and implementation measures to developing countries. This process requires a high level of integrity, and despite the technology, the advanced technology that they have, the developed countries are ignoring the goals they need to meet for 2050. They ignore the limited resources of developing countries, and they leave them responsible with very limited resources for reaching goals they cannot possibly reach. They have unfortunately ignored the requirements to take steps to deal with the neo-colonialist history of developed countries' actions. Developed countries, instead of confronting this, feel proud for shouldering common but differentiated responsibilities. Developed countries which are putting pressure on others to act are those who are responsible for the greatest expansion in the promotion and production of fossil fuels. They pass massive business deals, and they all the while refuse to provide proper finance to developing countries. The UNFCCC scientists have tried to place the focus only on the human rights of people living in the global north, while they ignore the dignity and the requirements of the majority of the global population. The countries defending human rights within the convention are those committing genocide against the Palestinian people outside of the convention, and they pass huge sums of money around in order to generate war, while they deny the necessary funding to promote the structural solutions required to change the system. The developed countries put front and center as non-negotiable the 1.5-degree target, but at the same time, they undermine the only possible steps that are required to attain it, requiring the 2030 zero-emission targets to be hit by developing countries only. This leads to greater poverty and economic dependence of developing countries. In this unfair and unequitable world, those who are responsible for carrying out climate mitigation actions are the countries who are historically responsible. But on the contrary, it is not them who are made responsible for taking the actions. It is the developing countries who are shouldering the greatest jeopardy. We are not in control of the decisions that we are making. We need a finance which will properly grant us the resources we need to take the steps. The finance that is hugely below our requirements is an insult, and it is a flagrant violation of justice and climate equity. Climate finance, as it stands in this agreement, is extinguishing international cooperation. We are moving on from the time of leaving no one behind to an era of let every man save himself. The climate finance, as it stands at the moment, does not tackle the unfair, unequitable status around the planet. The peoples and civil society have the memory and the energy to call for their rights, and they will not tire until they achieve climate justice. In this context, we repeat that ambitious climate action by developed countries depends on the compliance with Article 4.7 of the Convention and Article 9.1 of the Paris Agreement, and this on the basis of the provision of public finance from developed countries which properly meets the requirements of the Global South, thus prioritizing the various goals based on the respective markets. In the face of genuine and tangible finance, it would be difficult without that, it would be difficult for developing countries to comply with the various goals enshrined in the context of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Climate finance is not charity. It is a legal obligation incumbent on developed countries. The amount of the goal agreed in this decision enshrines climate injustice and does not meet the legitimate demands of developing countries. The payment of climate debts is a right that the people of the Global South are entitled to claim. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. Your statement will be reflected in the report. May I urge parties to keep your statement brief. Nigeria, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I wanted to say I appreciate the effort that has been made to ensure that we get to where we are, but I do lend my voice to India. And it's going to be a huge disservice to myself, my country, and the women, the rural women, the women who are in the developing countries. Not just the women, everybody. If we walk back home with 300 and we say that the developed countries are taking the lead, this is an insult to what the convention says. Should I remind us of what the convention says? That it noted that developed countries had the largest share of historical and current global emissions. This might be 1994, but it's still very current till now. It also said that the developed countries will take the lead, and this lead is climate finance. That the developing country is saying that it's taking the lead with $300 billion till 2035 is a joke. And it's not something we should take lightly. I do not think it's something we should clap our hands and force us to take it. I do not think so. I think we should rethink it. It's not just by putting it in our statements, but we have a right as countries to choose if we're going to take this or not. And I'm saying that we do not accept this. You expect us to have ambitious NDCs. The NCQG was supposed to enable us to have realistic finance goals. $300 billion is unrealistic. Let us tell ourselves the truth. This is 3 a.m. and we are going to clap our hands and say this is what we're going to do? I don't think so.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. Your statement will be reflected in the report. I invite parties to turn to agenda sub-item 9A, Global Goal on Adaptation. If any countries, European Union, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And we were all here the last few days, so we all know how very, very difficult it was. And yet we do feel that the result of today is actually exceptionally important. We are living in a time of truly challenging geopolitics, and we should simply not have the illusion that it will soon get better. So sealing a deal truly is exceptional. Last year I said that COP28 was the beginning of the end of fossil fuels. And what I would like to add now is that, in my view, COP29 will be remembered as the start of a new era for climate finance. And the European Union and its member states will continue to play a leading role. And we have worked hard with all of you to ensure that there is significantly more money on the table. We're tripling the 100 billion goal, and we feel it is ambitious, it is needed, it is realistic, and it is achievable. And we are confident that this will be a tale of delivery. And we've worked hard to support, in particular, those who are the most vulnerable. Access to finance will improve. We have agreed to further boost adaptation finance. And that is an area where public money is really, truly the driving force. Chair, it is also a matter of fairness and of importance to us that all those with the ability to do so should contribute. And therefore, it is good, given the size of the problem, that we enlarge the contributor base on a voluntary basis. And we're also seeing a historic expansion of the very important role of multilateral development banks in supporting this transition. This simply will bring much, much more private money on the table, and that is what we need. And with these funds, and with this structure, we are confident we will reach the 1.3 trillion objective. Ladies and gentlemen, another topic that was on our minds this week is reducing emissions. It was not the focus of this COP, but we wanted more, because the world needs more of it. And even though the UAE consensus was attacked, we did move forward, even though it was just a bit. We did manage to safeguard Dubai and take some steps forward. It is less than what we have liked, but it is better than we feared. So we're unhappy to lose a year. We're happy not to lose this fight. And it is not over. We are looking forward to redoubling our efforts until COP30. And we all need to come to Belém with ambitious new nationally determined contributions. Ladies and gentlemen, may I also say that we did deliver on Article 6, and that is a leap forward as well. We have witnessed the historical conclusion of the rulebook for carbon markets. We now have standards with a UN stamp of approval on it. And this will drive investment, raise ambition, and bring transparency and higher standards. Dear friends, this COP delivered on climate finance, on a goal and an increased donor base. It also delivered on creating trusted rules for international carbon markets. And surely we would have wanted more on mitigation and stronger language throughout the text on gender and human rights. And I'll come to that in a sec. But I have seen a very complex, yet truly impressive week of diplomacy, of rising to the occasion, of exchanging with partners across the globe, not only to those with whom we agree, but particularly also to those with whom we do not yet agree, of strengthening our multilateral processes. And indeed, negotiations, conversations like these are always difficult. But I do trust that we can deliver again next year for everyone in all parts of the world. So, dear Chair, let me finally say that we were trying to indicate our desire to speak on human rights earlier and on gender. And we would like you to know, we would like all of the audience to know, that we lend our voice in the strongest possible way to all those who have earlier spoken in the defense and further enhancement of both gender equality and human rights. It needs to be mainstreamed, and we need to have it across the agenda and everywhere in the document. Chair, I thank you also for all of your efforts.
Thank you for your statement. Malawi, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I want to raise my voice on behalf of the 45 least developed countries that I spoke for in the afternoon in the other room when we met. I want to agree with India, Bolivia, and also Nigeria as to the statements that they have provided. I just want to register that our group of the ODCs, this goal is not what we expected to get after some years of discussions. It's not ambitious to us. I just want to refer to paragraph 3, Mr. President, in which we have highlighted the need that we have, the gap that exists between climate finance flows and the needs. And we have quantified together that need in trillions and billions of dollars per year up to 2030. And then after noting this, the figure we are getting in paragraph 8 is far less than what we need to get. and therefore we don't seem to be serious enough to achieve the goal that we all envisage to get. I also want to raise a point, Mr. President, that if you go through the text, we do not see a share that should be coming to the least developed countries group, and also our colleagues in the small and developing states that we have been presenting together a call for a share, a particular share to flow through to our two groups. This is not contained in the text. And also, if we go into paragraph 14, we only acknowledge the need to support loss and damage in some way, but then we have not made a provision for this support in the text to go towards loss and damage. We have presented over the years that we need to see the new goal to support adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage, and this is not reflected in the text. As such, we also want to register our reservation to accept this proposal as it stands, Mr. Co-President. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. Your statement will be reflected in the report. Pakistan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished party members, ladies and gentlemen. Pakistan extends its heartfelt appreciation to the government and the people of Azerbaijan for hosting COP29. With an exceptional dedication and hospitality, the administrative arrangements were impeccable, ensuring conducive environment for meaningful negotiation and collaboration. We commend the COP29 presidency for its leadership and tireless efforts for instilling these critical decisions with inclusivity and fairness, reflecting the spirit of multilateralism. Pakistan stresses that the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities from the very basis of global climate change. We also reframe that COP remains the most essential critical forum for going global consensus towards the achievements of the goals of UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, especially Paris Agreement's global temperature target of 1.5 Celsius. We came to Baku with the spirit that our decisions here on critical issues such as new collective quantified goals and CQGs, the global stocktake, GST, and the just transition will put us back on track to achieve goals of the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement. However, we are leaving Baku with mixed feelings and a heavy heart. We note critical gaps in the decisions we all adopted here. Global solidarity is important, but the goals put forward by the developed countries does not match with the needs of the developing countries for the implementation of their NDCs and National Adaptation Plan. We have faced two devastating floods and displaced millions, and glaciers are melting, and heat waves have made living impossible. We demand climate justice. It is not charity, it is moral obligation. Countries are forced to resort to loans to handle the challenges of climate impact. Climate crisis is converting into debt crisis because means of implementation are not clear. We welcome adaptation plan, however, gap in the means of implementation is widening. We also welcome the decisions on Article 6 as well. This all said, as we move towards 62th session of SBZs followed by COP30, we do so with a hopeful determination and that we will further consolidate the decisions that taken today were vulnerable developing countries, where vulnerable developing countries will be given their due share. Multilateralism remains the cornerstone of Pakistan's climate diplomacy. We urge all parties to uphold its spirit and return to the negotiation table with renewed commitment to address these outstanding critical issues comprehensively, equitably. Thank you so very much, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. Your statement will reflect it in the report. I invite parties to turn to agenda sub-item 9A, Global Goal on Adaptation. On this sub-item, the subsidiary bodies considered the matter and forwarded it for further consideration to CMA. I invited Lamin Dibba and Tina Kabylshik to continue facilitating technical discussions. In addition, ministerial consultations were conducted by Ministers Eamon Ryan and Franz Tottenbach. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024/L.20. Thank you. I now invite parties to turn to agenda item 6, Sharm el-Sheikh Mitigation Ambition and Implementation Work Programme. The subsidiary bodies considered this matter but could not conclude its consideration. On Monday, 18 November, I invited Ursula Fuentes and Marcela Quecana to facilitate discussions on the technical elements. Ministerial consultations were conducted by Ministers Tore Sandvik and Dion George. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decision contained in document CMA/2024/L.23. Thank you. I invite parties to turn to agenda sub-item 11J, United Arab Emirates dialogue on implementing the global stocktake outcomes referred to in paragraph 97 of decision 1/CMA.5. The matters under this sub-item were considered under the SBI, which forwarded it to CMA for further consideration. On Monday, 18 November, I invited Ricardo Marshall and Patrick Spicer to continue to facilitate discussions on this matter. I hereby invite the CMA to adopt the draft decisions contained in documents CMA/2024/L.21. Chile, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me start by thanking you and your team for all the great efforts that have been done in the discussions and elaboration of this text. I think it's, on behalf of ILAC, this is something that reflects the commitment and the willingness to move forward in this important matter of what do we do together with the outcomes of the global stocktake. In our view, the text that we have in front of us lacks a number of very important elements. For example, we believe that the text does not reflect adequately the tools and procedures that we need to have in place in order to achieve the most of the outcomes of the GST and inform adequately the NDCs that need to be presented next year. We believe, for example, that our standard procedure under our process would require that the dialogue to have a report so everybody can understand what the dialogue was all about, to record the main ideas and to carry them forward to a decision that the CMA should take in order to make sure that we have continuity in our process. From our point of view, this is standard procedure in our process. And it would be particularly important to have those procedures in place for such a fundamental process like the GST that is a key element in this ambition cycle that in turn is in the heart of the success of the Paris Agreement. Again, I would like to commend you for all the efforts. And we have seen with our own eyes the efforts of your team in trying to bring us together around this text. However, in our view, the text does not enjoy consensus. And we respect fully the views of other parties that see in this text an acceptable proposal. We differ. We believe that the text does not enjoy consensus. So we would like to register our views before you submit this for adoption of the CMA. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I take note of your statement. It will be noted in the report. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I deliver that statement on behalf of EIG. I would also like to start by thanking the co-facilitators for the efforts, also your team, in supporting negotiation of this agenda item. However, like the colleagues from ILAC, we cannot support the draft decision as it is. It falls short of delivering a meaningful space to progress on our ambition. Last year, we took stock of our efforts to implement the Paris Agreement, and we agreed on specific actions to take to fulfill the gap. The proposed decision does not create such a meaningful action. We regret that the draft was significantly watered down by some to limit discussion on the critical elements of the global stocktake, such as energy transition. We are concerned to see attempts to backtrack from the commitments taken last year. Implementing the global stocktake means, first and foremost, implementing it at home. But it also means tracking progress on our collective commitment, having a space with sufficient time for meaningful exchanges, and having the possibility to take forward recommendation if necessary. We can and must do better next year. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Maldives, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we would like to join others in expressing our gratitude to you and your team for the excellent hospitality and efforts extended throughout this process. I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States. We have engaged in good faith in negotiations under this agenda item, one that is of the utmost importance to us. We have shown considerable flexibility in seeking to reach an acceptable outcome. Regretfully, this has not occurred. The text we see before us falls short of our expectations, of our delegation, and also of our group. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fiji joins others in thanking you for your hospitality. Fiji fully aligns with the statement made by Maldives on behalf of IOCs. We came here to make up for lost time. We came here to re-establish hope. But we have been continuously asked to ignore our needs, close our eyes, and step backward. We will not entertain that request. We may be small, but in that smallness, we represent the many. We represent the risk and the reality of a crisis that knows no bounds. We have contributed the least to this crisis, but continue to be forced to play the role of an expert on its causes and implications. The smallest have shouted the loudest too long. Without one voice and purpose, with geopolitics as our compass, with self-interest as our guide, with $7 trillion a year pouring into the source of the problem, the transition we need will not be achieved. The failure to agree a strong outcome on the United Arab Emirates dialogue on implementing the global stocktake outcomes due to the positions that conflict with those very outcomes agreed just 12 months ago is an affront to this process, to the basis of the Convention and the Paris Agreement, and to all those banking on us to deliver a safe future. In our efforts to protect and achieve the 1.5-degree temperature goal, we are not willing to be held hostage on the basis of ambition. The experience here is a stark reminder that we need to do more at all levels and across all constituencies and groups to create a shared vision that is premised on science and an unwavering understanding of the purpose, utility, and shows societal imperative to keep the global average temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. Canada, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We made historic commitments a year ago, including to transition away from fossil fuels. We came here to translate that commitment into meaningful action, and quite simply, we have fallen short. Canada joins AOSIS, ILAC, and EIG and other speakers in expressing our extreme disappointment that we could not make progress and achieve agreement on a stronger text. The GST decision under the UAE COP28 presidency conveyed a real urgency and a clear direction of travel for the transition towards net zero and resilient societies and economies. We cannot bury that promise. Rather, we need to all show a commitment to act. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. Australia, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, Australia is speaking on behalf of the umbrella group of countries. We are disappointed that some parties have sought to slow or stymie discussions to take forward the ambitious calls from the global stocktake to triple renewable energy, double energy efficiency, and transition away from fossil fuels. However, the global momentum toward net zero is accelerating and is irreversible. Countries are already working to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy, grids and storage, and to capture the enormous economic opportunities and to provide better jobs and futures for their workers and communities. We affirm our strong resolve to take forward the ambitious actions in paragraph 28 of the global stocktake in our countries and through our ongoing discussions in this forum on the implementation of the global stocktake.
Thank you for your statement. In view of these concerns from the parties, I propose that the CMA requests the subsidiary body for implementation to continue consideration of this matter at its 62nd sessions with a view to recommending a draft decision for consideration at CMA 7. I further propose that the package of outcomes just adopted on the CMA on the NCQG, the global goal on adaptation, the mitigation work program, be named as Baku Climate Unity Pact. I invite the CMA to consider Agenda Item 5, United Arab Emirates Just Transition Work Programme. This item was considered by the subsidiary bodies. At the plenary meeting on 16th of November, the subsidiary bodies forwarded this matter to the CMA for further considerations. At our resumed 5th meeting on Monday, 18th November, I invited Kishore Kumar Singh and George Borting to continue to facilitate discussions on this matter. While parties engaged in constructive exchange of views, consideration of this matter could not be completed at this session. I propose to the CMA to request the SAPSTA and the SBI to continue consideration of this matter at the 62nd sessions, June 2025. With a view to recommending a draft decision for consideration and adoption by the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement at its 7th session, November 2025. Thank you. I now invite the CMA to consider agenda item 19, other matters. Would parties like to raise any matters? No. I invite parties to turn the agenda to agenda item 20, conclusion of the session. The draft report is contained in document CMA/2024/L.2. I invite the CMA to adopt the draft report. On the outstandings that the reporter, with the assistance of the Secretariat, will complete the report and make it available to all parties. Thank you. I declare this meeting on CMA adjourned. I now resume the 11th meeting of the COP. I invite parties to turn to agenda item 20, conclusion of the session. I invite Noura Hamladji from the Secretariat to provide us with the preliminary assessments of the resource implications of decisions adopted by the COP here in Baku. Noura, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Several provisions contained in decision adopted by the COP, CMP and CMA at this session have a resource implication over and above the work program for biennium 2024-2025. Under COP agenda item 10, matters relating to capacity building, an amount of €33,000 will be required in 2025. The estimated amount will be absorbed within available resources. Under COP Agenda 11, matters relating to the least developed countries, an amount of €1.55 million will be required in 2025. Under COP Agenda Item 17A, Administrative, Financial and Institutional Matters, supplementary funding in the amount of €342,000 for 2025 will be required. Under CMA Agenda Item 8, reporting and review pursuant to Article 13 of the Paris Agreement, provision of financial and technical support to developing country parties for reporting and capacity building, an amount of €81,000 will be required in 2025. Under CMA Agenda Item 9A, Global Goal on Adaptation, an amount of €349,000 will be required in 2025. Under CMA Agenda Item 11A, New Collective Quantifying Goal on Climate Finance, an amount of €648,000 will be required in 2025. Under CMA Agenda Item 15A, Guidance on Cooperative Approaches referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 2 of the Paris Agreement, an amount of €450,000 will be required in 2025. Under CMA Agenda Item 15C, matters relating to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, work program under the framework for non-market approaches referred to in Article 6, Paragraph 8 of the Paris Agreement, an amount of €57,000 will be required in 2025. Under COP Agenda Item 12, CMP Agenda Item 8 and CMA Agenda Item 14, report of the Forum of the Impact of the Implementation of Response Measures, an amount of €29,000 will be required in 2025. The estimated amount will be absorbed within available resources. All estimated amounts are preliminary and based on information currently available. The Secretariat counts on the continued collaboration of the parties to provide funding for these activities in a timely and in a predictable manner, as without those contributions, the Secretariat will not be able to undertake the requested activities. I thank you.
Thank you, Nora. The draft report is contained in document CP/2024/L.1. I invite the COP to adopt the draft report on the understanding that the reporter, with the assistance of the Secretariat, will complete the report and make it available to all parties. Thank you. Now I declare this meeting of the COP adjourned. Distinguished delegates, colleagues, I declare open the joint 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol. And the 12th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Paris Agreement. Distinguished delegates, welcome to the joint plenary to hear statements from groups of parties and observers. It is my pleasure to invite Simon to address the plenary. Simon, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mukhtar. Excellencies, delegates, colleagues, friends. I want to start by thanking the Presidency for all they have done to enable the Finance COP here in Baku. It has been a difficult journey, but we've delivered a deal. This new finance goal is an insurance policy for humanity amid worsening climate impacts hitting every country. But like any insurance policy, it only works if premiums are paid in full and on time. Promises must be kept to protect billions of lives. This deal will keep the clean energy boom growing, helping all countries to share in its huge benefits. More jobs, stronger growth, cheaper and cleaner energy for all. We needed this to be an enabling COP, one which helped translate the pledges of COP28 into real-world outcomes to protect people, prosperity, and the planet. And that's what we have made possible. At COP28, the world agreed to triple renewables. At COP29, we tripled climate finance. And countries will work to mobilize much, much more. At COP28, the world agreed to boost climate resilience. COP29 will help finance real protections for those on the front lines, especially the most vulnerable. COP29 also reached global agreement on carbon markets after almost a decade of hard work, where several previous COPs were not able to get this done. No country got everything they wanted, and we leave Baku with a mountain of work to do. The many other issues we need to progress may not be headlines, but they are lifelines for billions of people. So this is no time for victory laps. We need to set our sights and redouble our efforts on the road to Belém. Even so, we've shown the UN Paris Agreement is delivering. but governments still need to pick up the pace. Let's not forget, without this UN-convened global cooperation, we'd be headed towards 5 degrees of global warming. But we're still a long way off course. Bold new climate plans on the way to Belém will be crucial to getting us back in the race. They must embed the targets we agreed in Dubai, including to rapidly ramp up renewables, transition away from fossil fuels, and transform societies, making them more resilient. Whole of economy, whole of society plans are crucial. We've seen clear signals here from 2 G20 countries, the UK and Brazil, because stronger climate actions are entirely in the interests of their economies and their people. Friends, progress here in Baku has been hard-won. I pay tribute to all those who worked around the clock. Even if you didn't get everything you sought, what you delivered will make billions of lives safer and better. To those of you who have joined from civil society, your work helps our process make progress. Today we set a new goal, and you will be vital in ensuring that that goal is fulfilled. To the staff of the Secretariat, you have been stretched beyond belief, and yet time and again you stood and delivered, so that tens of thousands of people from almost 200 countries could come together and take global climate efforts forward. I have never seen a harder working group of people that steady the ship when times get tough. Excellencies, friends, we still have a very long road ahead of us. But here in Baku, we took another important step forward. The UN Paris Agreement is humanity's life raft. There is nothing else. So here in Baku, and all of the countries represented in this room, we're taking that journey forward together. I thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Excellencies, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of a defining chapter in the climate crisis. We have closed the first decade after the Paris Agreement, and we have almost finished our work here at COP29. Let me express our deepest gratitude to everyone who helped us. The COP presidency thanks the President of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev. Upon his instruction, all necessary facilities were provided to ensure the smooth and effective running of the conference. It was his vision for Azerbaijan to host COP29, and his leadership ensured that it was a success. His guidance and support has been an inspiration for all of us. Let me express our gratitude to the UNFCCC team and Simon Steele, to the whole UN family and the Secretary General who mobilized for us, to the leaders, negotiators, ministerial pairs, interpreters, activists, support staff, and the thousands of volunteers who offered Azerbaijani who offered Azerbaijani sincerity and hospitality. We're also grateful to those who came before us, from Rio to Kyoto, from Paris to Dubai, where my good friend Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber provided us with a platform to build on for our own success here in Baku. Since the beginning of this journey, people doubted that Azerbaijan could deliver. They doubted that everyone could agree. They were wrong on both. We never accepted that the task was impossible. We knew that breakthroughs demand courage. We understood that reaching for the highest possible ambition is difficult. And we asked everyone to be brave. We called on you to think of each other. We put LDCs and seeds at the heart of the process. And we insisted that you think of your shared future. I must also recognize that entire COP29 presidency team for their hard work. Lead negotiator Yalchin and his dedicated team. CEO Nermin and her fantastic staff. CEO El Nur, high-level champion Nigar, and youth climate champion Leila and their fabulous teams. Every team member who rose to the challenge. Together we hosted one of the largest COPs with only 11 months to prepare. There were many sleepless nights away from your families and much personal sacrifice. Now you deserve to go back home, proud of our achievements. Throughout the summit, so many people stepped up and contributed. You supported our action agenda initiatives. We worked together to address thematic issues such as biodiversity, water, agriculture, cities, tourism, health, and others. And we saw countries, the private sector, international financial institutions, NGOs, civil society, indigenous peoples, and others all come forward. To enable action, we finally established the framework for high-integrity carbon markets with Article 6. We are now ready to start approving projects. This market will unlock trillions and save us billions. They will help channel resources to the developing world. And they will reduce the cost of implementing our climate plans. They will mean more coal plants decommissioned, more wind farms built, and more forests planted. They will work taken nearly a decade, and it comes just in time to support ambition in our next NDCs. And through all these challenges, we stayed focused on our top negotiating priority, a new climate finance goal. This was the hardest task that multilateral climate process has ever attempted. We had many difficult conversations. We never stopped pulling you together. We pushed you to reach for the highest possible ambition. With this breakthrough, the Baku finance goal will turn billions into trillions over the next decade. Dear colleagues, under the COP29 presidency, we still have more to do. First, we all need to underpin everything with robust transparency in our biennial transparency reports by the end of the year. We are delighted to announce that Azerbaijan has submitted its report. And we thank everyone else who has already submitted this report. We have also submitted our national adaptation plan. and call on everyone to submit their plans by 2025. We then encourage everyone to submit the new NDCs by the February deadline. The COP29 presidency will remain active throughout the year. We will support the incoming Brazilian presidency. We will continue to build partnership between the Rio Conventions, and we will continue to bring you together in our action agenda platforms such as Big Fit, Harmonia, Baku Dialogue on Water for Climate Action, and many others. Before we all meet again in Belém, allow me to say this. Never forget the value of your contribution. Never doubt the power of your example. Never lose the courage you showed here in Baku. And remember that protecting the planet is an act of solidarity. There are billions of people around the world united in this common cause. They are contributing with quiet determination. And when you act, you reached out to them. You reached out to the friends, families, fellow citizens, and people you have never met. You reach out to generations, past, present, and future. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for putting your trust in Azerbaijan to guide this process. Thank you for giving us the chance to bring you together. Let's move forward together in solidarity for a green world. I thank you. Dear delegates, as mentioned at the beginning of the closing plenary, in the light of the late hour, I once again strongly urge parties who would like to take the floor to keep their interventions concise and propose to limit the time per speaker for 3 minutes. Please note that statements can be uploaded to the submissions portal in the lieu of, and in addition to, oral delivery. Statements that are submitted to the Secretariat will be uploaded to a dedicated web page. Dear colleagues, we will begin the plenary with statements from groups of parties. After hearing statements from groups, the floor will be opened for statements from the individual parties, followed by the statements from the observers. I encourage groups of parties, individual parties, and observers to keep their statement and within the 3 respective time limit. You will hear a bell when you have used up the time allotted for your statement. I appeal to the parties to stay in the room while the observers deliver their statements. I would like now to invite statements for the 4 groups with non-overlapping membership. I encourage you to keep your statement to a maximum of 3 minutes. I now invite the delegation of Uganda to deliver a statement on behalf of Group of 77 and China. Uganda, you have the floor.
Excellencies, it's a privilege to speak at the closing of COP29 on behalf of G77 and China. It has been many long working days. G77 and China have worked hard in making sure that we make our best efforts to uphold the evolving needs and priorities of developing countries. I thank all for this effort and commitment put in. I thank the COP29 presidency, government of Azerbaijan and its people for your hospitality. I also thank the UNFCCC Secretariat, all the staff at the venue and volunteers who supported in making this COP possible. Thank you, President, and your colleagues for your leadership. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite the European Union to deliver a statement. Hungary, you have the floor. The microphone is not working there. Please, it's working now.
Thank you, dear President. First of all, let me thank to you and your whole team and Azerbaijan and the people of Azerbaijan the great work and all the effort that you delivered, not just throughout these past 2 weeks, but also throughout this whole year. In the preparation, thank you for everything that you've been done for the process and to achieve the decisions here. For the interest of the time and also considering that the Commissioner has delivered the statement, we will submit the full version of the statement now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite the Environmental Integrity Group to deliver a statement. Switzerland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and let me first thank you, your negotiation team, and all the volunteers for your tremendous and tireless efforts to make this COP happen and to make it a success. Colleagues, Baku represents a bridge between East and West. We came together to build a bridge between nations to collaborate in tackling climate change. Today, we have finally operationalized the carbon market with high environmental integrity. This is a major step to unleash the full potential of carbon markets, delivering robust, environmentally sound and much-needed rapid emission reductions around the globe. And after 3 years of negotiations, we welcome the new collective quantified goal for climate finance. Meeting the 100 billion goal in 2022 and continuing to deliver it annually until 2025 was an essential first step. Today, we are pleased to adopt a new comprehensive goal. We have to ensure that those most affected by climate change and most vulnerable among us have access to the support needed. Committing to the Paris Agreement also means unlocking the climate finance needed, transforming our global financial system to support ambitious NDCs, to limit global temperature to 1.5, and to force adaptation and climate resilience. More than ever, we need all hands on deck. We welcome all actors, including those outside the UN climate regime, to work together to enable the scaling up of finance to tackle climate change. Speaking promises, we regret that we're leaving COP29 by breaking one. In Dubai, we made headlines as we upheld the importance of 1.5 aligned NDCs, as we all committed to triple renewable energy, double energy efficiency, and transitioning away from fossil fuels. Now, where are we now, 1 year after our collective promise? Just days after signing the agreement, some appear to be walking it back, calling it a menu of options. Progress is not enough. The timing is even worse. 2024 is set to be the hottest year on record. We take this opportunity to emphasize once more that the path away from fossil fuels is the only path to a safe world for all. It is up to us how we manage and collaborate to ensure a just transition. We call for a space in this process where countries can exchange on best practices and common challenges with regards to energy transition. We also regret that at this COP we couldn't have progress on human rights, gender and intergenerational equity. Social justice should be in the heart of our climate action. For adaptation, we are happy to see development of indicators progress under the GGA. We'll have the opportunity to enhance and continue developing our NAPs and to strengthen our resilience with a human rights and gender-based approach, taking on board indigenous people and traditional knowledge. In this decade, we have all to come forward with 1.5 aligned NDCs and present our BTRs and the deadline of the 21st of December. We'll call on all countries to reflect the highest position ambitions. Every degree of warming we avoid matters to communities around the globe, especially the most vulnerable among us. Despite the setbacks, EIG leaves Baku with determination to work harder for the implementation and to reignite the ambitions that brought us together in Paris. As we look to COP30 in Belém, let this gathering be a wake-up call. The stakes are too high, the science too clear, and the time too short for half measures. Let us not merely reflect on what we missed, but resolve to build a future defined by bold, equitable action. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite the Umbrella Group to deliver a statement. Australia, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, I'm pleased to speak on behalf of the Umbrella Group of countries. The Umbrella Group recognises the historic agreement reached here in Baku on a new collective quantified goal. These negotiations have been challenging and important. We express our appreciation to the many experts who've contributed to this outcome, to Zahir Fakir and Fiona Gilbert, who've worked tirelessly as the co-chairs of the ad hoc work programme, and to the 4 presidencies that have guided this work: the United Kingdom, Egypt, the UAE, and of course Azerbaijan. We recognise the significance of the agreement to mobilise $300 billion per year by 2035 for developing countries as part of a global effort, as well as the broader call to work together to scale up financing from all sources to at least $1.3 trillion per year to support climate action in developing countries. This will play a significant role in supporting an ambitious response to climate change in developing countries. We're disappointed the recognition of the special circumstances of SIDS and LDCs was not meaningfully operationalised. We believe resources should target the most vulnerable. We're also disappointed by the removal of references to human rights from the text. We must ensure climate finance is responsive to human rights. On the UAE dialogue, we were disappointed that some parties have sought to slow or stymie discussions to take forward the ambitious calls from the global stocktake to triple renewable energy, double energy efficiency and transition away from fossil fuels. However, the global momentum toward net zero is irreversible. We reaffirm our strong resolve to take forward the ambitious actions in paragraph 28 of the global stocktake in our countries and through our ongoing discussions on the implementation of the GST in this forum. We were disappointed that parties weren't able to capture in full the wealth of policy, investment and technological solutions discussed under the Mitigation Work Programme. We must take every opportunity to scale up our ambition and implementation. We affirm our resolve to use every opportunity under this work programme to profile key actions, build collaboration and explore investment opportunities so that we can all reach net zero faster. We are very pleased to see the completion of work to fully implement Articles 6.2 and 6.4. The outcomes agreed here will enable carbon markets under the Paris Agreement to move forward with confidence. It's been a long road to the completion of this work, begun in 2016 after the adoption of the Paris Agreement. This is a key outcome for COP29, and we thank all parties for their constructive engagement to reach agreement this year. We welcome the progress made on refinements to the global stocktake and on indicators for assessing progress towards the global goal on adaptation, and will redouble efforts to finalise a gender action plan in 2025 for adoption at Belém. On the Just Transition Work Programme, we were disappointed that progress couldn't be captured. These are key issues that many countries are grappling with and should be a key focus as we help our workers and economies transition to net zero. We were disappointed that we couldn't reach a decision on national adaptation plans, given the important role adaptation will play in responding to the climate crises. And we're concerned that in several decisions there's an absence of strong language acknowledging our obligations to respect, protect and fulfil human rights. Parties, as we look toward 2025, we reaffirm the clear call for all countries to put forward ambitious, economy-wide NDCs that include all sectors and gases and that are aligned with 1.5 degrees. These will be critical to our shared future and to the economic prosperity of our countries. We call on all countries, particularly major economies, to put forward their highest possible ambition. Finally, Excellencies, we thank the government of Azerbaijan for hosting COP29 in the historic city of Baku. We thank the people of Baku for their warm welcome, including the many friendly volunteers. Mr. President, we thank you for your personal leadership and the dedication of your team to deliver these outcomes in our shared fight against climate change. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. Distinguished delegates, I will now open the floor for statements from other groups for a maximum of 3 minutes. I give the floor to Kenya, speaking on behalf of the African Group of Negotiators. Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Kenya speaks on behalf of the African Group and aligns with the statement of G77 and China. As we conclude COP29, we extend African Group's gratitude to the Presidency for hosting us, for your warm hospitality with the heartwarming presence of your young volunteers in the beautiful city of Baku. Your leadership has ensured that achieving an outcome remains the foundation of our negotiations. Today, Africa stands here with a sense of realism and resignation. We leave Baku knowing that we have achieved some progress in some areas, but that what we had achieved was far from what we had hoped for. Delivery of the aims of the Convention and its Paris Agreement remain deeply uncertain. We are extremely disappointed at the lack of progress on issues critical to Africa. We remind all that Africa's share for global emissions remains negligible. If the world overshoots the 1.5 degrees goal, it will not be because of Africa, and yet it is Africa that stands to bear the brunt of that failure. Africa has and will continue to sound the alarm on the inadequacy of climate finance. At this COP, we achieved progress in some respects, but we appear to be regressing in others. The commitment to mobilize enhanced finance by 2035 is too little, too late, and too ambiguous in its delivery. Let it be clear that the agreed figure of 300 billion per annum is inadequate to deliver the Paris Agreement goals. As we observed many a time, the Adaptation Gap Report confirms that the adaptation needs are about $400 billion. We reiterate the review agreed in the text today should be in line with the needs of developing countries. Our task now is to translate words into action. We cannot stop the promises on paper. Substantial flows must reach those on the front lines. Families forced to flee rising seas, farmers facing failed crops, and communities recovering from droughts and floods. On the global goal on adaptation, the necessary guidance to experts on their work gives us a platform upon which we can develop global indicators with local relevance, including indicators for support towards different elements of the targets. It is also crucial to emphasize the importance of provision of financial support to developing countries for implementing their national adaptation plans by 2030. On the Just Transition Work Programme, there seems to be no political will for an internationally equitable transition where the burdens and benefits are shared across nations. Regarding the GST, it is going to be extremely difficult for us to explain how we could not agree on the GST annual dialogue and refinement of the GST process. How could we spend so much time negotiating the scope of the UAE dialogue? On the operationalization of Article 6, Baku made significant strides from the outset at the conference. We hope that the safeguards contained in these decisions will ensure environmental integrity, transparency, and inclusive participation of all parties. The African Group remains committed to continuing to improve the rules and guidance, make the Paris Agreement's crediting mechanism a reference in carbon credit standards that will point the way for both compliance and voluntary markets. Regarding Article 6.8 on the Glasgow Committee on Non-Market Approaches, we are confident that the decision taken here in Baku will enable the implementation of concrete projects and programs in the ground. We came into this process with clear expectations, as did all other parties. A multilateral process is by its nature, a convergence of competing priorities and diverse realities. While not all aspirations are fully reflected in the outcome, we acknowledge the effort made to balance these dynamics. We are realistic about the journey ahead, but let us remember that these commitments are not acts of charity. They are acts of survival, shared prosperity, and solidarity. Climate finance is not a handout. It is the moral and economic imperative of our age. As I close, I remind all of us of the Southern Africans' concept of Ubuntu. I am because we are. When Africa loses, the world loses. When Africa thrives, the world thrives. We reaffirm the principles of Paris Agreement and the Convention and the UAE consensus, and we commit ourselves to working with all parties to deliver on the commitments made here today. Let us rise together to meet this moment. History will judge us not by what we promised, but by what we delivered. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite Saudi Arabia to deliver a statement on behalf of Arab states. Saudi Arabia, you have the floor.
In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Your Excellency, Mr. Mukhtar Babayev, President of COP29, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, my delegation takes the floor in the name of 22 nations, part of the Arab League. The Arab group associates itself with the statement delivered by Uganda in the name of the Group of 77 and China. President, as we conclude COP29, it is our pleasure to express our sincere gratitude for all the efforts that have been expended during COP29 to achieve progress in global climate action. We would like to commend the wise leadership of the Azerbaijani Presidency, which has led to the negotiations to achieve a number of ambitious results which do reflect our collective ambition to overcome collective challenges. And in the name of the Arab group, we'd like to express our sincere gratitude and thanks in your collaboration with all the parties in order to reach the new collective quantified goal, which will bring further support to developing countries as we all face the repercussions of climate change. The Arab group would like also to congratulate the international community for the Article 6 achievement. This is a real milestone in consolidating global climate action and the delivery on the Paris Agreement. The Arab group would like to also welcome the 5-year plan that would like to take into account the socio-economic impacts linked to the required work for climate action. We'd like to continue working with the UAE consensus and the Baku roadmap in such a way as there's continuity in our action as we continue to make progress towards the GGA at CMA 7 and beyond. The Arab group, Mr. President, sees that we need to further confirm the basic principles in the efforts of mitigation as part of our Paris Agreement work and the UNFCCC. Such principles include equity and common but differentiated responsibilities, as well as insistence on the importance of developing states leading these efforts globally. This also includes a recognition of the various tracks that do reflect the various conditions and capabilities of each state, as well as the importance of respecting sovereignty of each nation, and also the ambition in the NDCs, which are the fulcrum and the backbone of the Paris Agreement, as they reflect the ambitions as well as the aspirations and the conditions of every state. These are the principles that will guarantee equity equality, and the respect for the multiplicity of tracks. And these are the principles that should be the bedrock of our common action, and we need to preserve those principles. We need to enable countries to be able to delineate their own tracks, such pathways that are based on the internal domestic contexts and their socio-economic realities. Ensuring that we continue on working with these principles will guarantee efficiency, equity, and comprehensiveness at the same time. We also must be cognizant that one solution could not fix all the various challenges that we face collectively as we go on our development journey. In conclusion, Mr. President, the Arab Group would like to express its sincere gratitude for your tremendous efforts, and we congratulate you for reaching the highest possible success at this COP29 here in Baku, Azerbaijan, and we thank everybody for their constructive efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite Samoa to deliver a statement on behalf of AOSIS. Samoa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, colleagues, I align with the statement made by Uganda on behalf of G77 and China. The Alliance of Small Island States joins the consensus on COP29. We have crossed many oceans and continents to meet here for a comprehensive outcome on finance goal. We had more hope that the process would protect the interests of the most vulnerable and those with the least capacity. Nevertheless, we once again have shown how the global community can come together to find solutions that serve humanity. Make no mistake, the agency for taking climate action to address the ever-worsening impacts of climate change remains. The level of ambition for taking climate action needs to be much, much higher. And it is our great hope that the additional finance administered as a result of the new goal will help get us there. On the overall finance goal, AOSIS is concerned over the lack of willingness to meet the needs of the vulnerable developing countries. This new finance goal will only serve to kickstart the implementation of our NDCs and NAPs. As we call for higher ambition on mitigation in the updated NDCs, it is paramount that we unlock more financing to ensure that NDCs are implemented in a timely manner. Time is not on our side. The need to implement ambitious NDCs is more urgent than ever, as is the need for effective adaptation measures and responses to loss and damage when adaptation hits its limits. Mr. President, SIDS cannot do this alone. We require transformational change and access to climate finance in accordance with the Convention and the Paris Agreement to ensure that we achieve the goal of a 1.5 world. As we look forward to Berlin next year, this will be the litmus test on which ambitious NDCs will be judged. Mr. President, on the GST, we arrived in Baku with a clear vision for the implementation of all GST outcomes as agreed upon in Dubai. It is disappointing that we have not made progress on this agenda item. We hope that by delaying the consideration of the refinements to the GST process to next year, that we will have an outcome that allows us to create the conditions for a successful second GST to begin in 2026. We are disappointed that we could not agree on the modalities of the UAE GST dialogue. For us, the purpose of the UAE dialogue has been clear. It should be a mechanism to implement and track progress and implementation of all outcomes of GST1, with a particular focus on finance and other means of implementation. However, we are extremely disappointed by the lack of ambition reflected in the text, especially concerning the mitigation aspects. It is crucial that we find a way to move forward with the mitigation outcomes we agreed upon in COP28 and ensure that the outcomes of the first GST do not end up a broken, forgotten promise, further imperiling the vulnerable people of our countries and everywhere. Excellencies and colleagues, we regret that the mitigation outcome at this conference under the Mitigation Work Programme is empty and low ambition. As parties, we must implement the Dubai outcomes, prioritizing the transition to renewable energy sources and phasing out fossil fuels. High emitters must commit to deep, rapid, and sustained reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions. Strengthening cooperation on finance, technology transfer, and capacity building is essential. Implementing targeted action in key sectors to reduce emissions is crucial. The woeful lack of direction to achieve the necessary ambition to meet the 1.5 goal sets us back at a time when we should be accelerating our actions. The continued delay will cost us innocent lives and result in more suffering. Mr. President, EOSIS has been calling for a just transition pathway which is fit for purpose that does not leave anyone behind. At this COP, we transitioned this text to increasingly unjust and unacceptable versions that fail to underscore the importance of just transition pathways in our NDCs, NAPs, and long-term low-emission development strategies, and further fail to establish the linkages from the outcomes of the first GSC relevant to just transition. We regret that our work here in this important area was in vain. We hope that we can resume next year with a renewed, genuine commitment to make progress on the Just Transition Work Programme as a beacon of hope to people everywhere. We welcome the efforts by the COP President to close these negotiations and wrap up the discussion here to enable us to fully unleash the potential and opportunities of market mechanism. We further welcome the decisions by the CMA at the start of this COP, which allowed parties to find common ground on cooperative approaches and Article 6.4. Adaptation is a high priority for SIDS. Unfortunately, adaptation, specifically the GTA, has not been given the attention it deserves at this COP. At this session, we would like to have moved further in steering the implementation of the UAE Bilim Work Programme on indicators. However, we remain hopeful with a concentrated effort next year. The UAE Bilim Work Programme will produce an outcome that facilitates the operationalization of the GGA framework through the achievement of its targets, saving millions of livelihoods and lives. Finally, Mr. President, as a small island nation, we must tie our work here to the oceans. We affirm the importance of the ocean and climate change dialogue and invite parties to take into account the ocean-relevant outcomes of the GST in the preparation of their new NDCs, noting that both the role of ocean-based action on climate change, particularly in renewable energy, and the vital intersection of ocean and coastal climate issues in adaptation policy planning. Mr. President, in closing, we would like to add our voice in support of your leadership. Thank you for your working tirelessly to help us agree on this outcome, and thank you for the warm hospitality extended to our SIDS delegation. So forth.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite Brazil to deliver a statement on behalf of BASIC. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are actually delivering this speech on behalf of Group Sur, which was represented at this COP29 by Brazil, Ecuador, Paraguay, and Uruguay. On the outset, we align ourselves to the statement made by Uganda on behalf of the G77 and China. Group Sur expresses its gratitude to the government and the people of Azerbaijan for the wonderful welcoming received during these 2 weeks. We also thank the Secretariat and all the workers and volunteers that made COP29 a reality. Our group congratulates all parties and all delegates for the engagement that were necessary for us to reach important decisions during this COP. And we welcome the results made here in Baku, including on the NCQG and Article 6. We are convinced that these agreements will resonate in our region, bringing real change back home and thus affecting positively the lives of the people. While we celebrate the steps already taken, we keep our visions in the near and far future. As we now enter the road from Baku to Belém, we recognize that we need to accelerate progress on the implementation of our collective commitments under the UNFCCC and its Paris Agreement. Group SU hopes that we will reach COP30 with a set of nationally determined contributions that are collectively aligned with the objective of limiting the increase in global temperatures to 1.5 degrees. For this, it is crucial that the commitments on the provision and mobilization of finance and other means of implementation are truly and effectively implemented, including with more finance for adaptation and for the most vulnerable countries, such as CIPs and LDCs. This will give us the foundation to enhance our levels of ambition accordingly. At this point, let me reiterate our group's position that enhancing climate finance is long overdue. We recall that all climate action shall respect human rights, the rights of indigenous people and local communities, of people of African descent, of children and youth, workers, small farmers, and other vulnerable groups. It must help us to achieve poverty eradication, just transitions, and sustainable development. Mr. President, we thank you once again, and let me finish by saying that we are eager to receive you all in Belém next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to Malawi to speak on behalf of least developed countries. Malawi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-President. And Mr. Co-President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues, Malawi is speaking on behalf of the 45 least developed countries. This is a collective voice representing 1.5 billion people on the front lines of the climate crisis. I do associate myself and my group with a statement made by Uganda on behalf of the Group of 27 and China, the African Group through Kenya, and also the EOSIS through Samoa. Mr. President, we commend your dedication in navigating in this difficult process. We appreciate all the efforts that you have made to take us through in the past 2 weeks up to this point. We are also grateful to the services and the support provided and received from the Secretariat and all the volunteers and the personnel on the ground. However, we have registered some level of profound disappointment. For example, Mr. President, the inadequacy of the current NCKG text or decision is not just a failure of diplomacy, it is a failure of justice. We leave this scope with both some pride and pain. Pride in the resilience of our bloc, the delegates that were here over the past 2 weeks from the group of the LDCs and the people that we are serving, which we fought valiantly for the survival of those most vulnerable people, but we also pained that our hopes for true climate justice have not been met. Mr. President, the LDCs group is extremely disappointed that we are leaving Baku without an ambitious climate finance goal and concrete emission reduction plans to limit the global average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The outcome that we got is further short of ambition to support adaptation and loss and damage comprehensively. This is not only unjust, it is unsustainable and undermines collective efforts towards building community resilience in most of the least developed countries, the small and developing states, and in other developing countries. In many areas, Mr. President, our special needs and circumstances have been completely neglected, a position that is in a complete disrespect of the principles of the Convention and the Paris Agreement. Mr. President, climate change is not an issue of charity. It is an issue of rights. It is an issue of survival, and our nations are not asking for favors. We are demanding what is necessary and fair to us. As we return home, Mr. President, we carry the weight of these discussions on our shoulders, resolved to continue with the fight. Our people deserve better, the planet deserves better, and time is not on our side. We see the loss of lives of millions of people in our communities, loss of property and infrastructure through various forms of loss and damage, displacement and migration of innocent people, food shortages, shrinking of poverty levels, and increased debt burdens. Living examples are abound in Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Madagascar, Bangladesh, Nepal, and in other areas. The recovery and reconstruction of these communities require millions and, in fact, billions of dollars. Mr. President, decisions on the GST, GGA, Mitigation Program, and Just Transition have not been favorable to our group. We can do better. And in conclusion, Excellency, distinguished delegates, it is hurtful that we continue to express our concerns, which seem not to be listened to when our communities continue to suffer. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Peru to make the statement on behalf of ILAC. Peru, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, President. President, distinguished delegates, Peru has the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of ILAC. We align this statement with the statement delivered by Uganda speaking on behalf of the G77 and China. First and foremost, we'd like to convey our gratitude to the Presidency, to the Secretariat, and to all those officials who have worked behind the scenes to make this COP possible. And we also very much wish to thank the inhabitants of Baku for their very warm welcome. We noted an adoption of a decision on financing today which fell short of the ambition that we were hoping for. Despite the efforts, we weren't able to send a clear message that we are here behind developing countries. Even we failed to live up to the expectations of Paris Agreement. What we owe to developing countries is not something of charity, but it's a moral obligation that we bear to developing countries, so that they can act as the cornerstone that they are to deal with a crisis for which they bear the brunt, because they're in the front line of the adverse impacts of climate change. With regard, we also regret the fact that we weren't ambitious when it comes to adaptation and to loss and damage, despite the attempts that were made to see progress when it came to the global goal and adaptation efforts. We continue to engage in debates and circular debates which don't leave us with any clarity as to how we're going to be able to deal with this key cornerstone of climate change action. We failed also to carry out the review process of the Warsaw implementation mechanism. We hope that our upcoming negotiations in June will be able to reach a fair conclusion on our debates on loss and damage in the Warsaw international mechanism, which reflect the aspirations and needs, particularly of developing countries. We regret the fact that despite our attempts to forge consensus over the last few weeks, the consensus on the UAE dialogue for the global stocktake and the modalities therefore failed to reach a satisfactory conclusion. In Baku, we managed to reach a partial conclusion when it comes to means of implementation. But having got partway through the agreement, what we will need to focus on next year is actual delivery, actual implementation in practice. We also need to continue new work on the Just Transition work programme, particularly to feed into our NDCs and our national adaptation plans, and the process needs to be inclusive and include all developing countries. We call for transition which moves us away from fossil fuels and their phase out. This needs to be a clear step taken forward. It will need to be a multi-sectoral approach and cover the entire economy. We also wish to underscore that it's important that we mainstream human rights in all of the aforementioned processes. We have the adopted text on Articles 6.2 and 6.4. We have some misgivings thereon, but we do recognise that they represent a balance, and we look forward to using these as tools to making concrete steps forward to bring about a fairer and cleaner world as provided for under Article 6. We welcome the adoption of the Declaration on Gender and Climate Change, which allows us to continue our work in this important sector, and we hope that this will culminate in a work plan that will allow us to pursue key action on gender and climate change. With regard to technology, we welcome the fact that during the second week we made progress in a joint understanding of the work programme on technology, which is a clear step forward here in Baku. which made it abundantly clear what the Centre for Technology's mandate and actions would be. And that's helped us to overcome some of the challenges which the Centre was previously confronted with. We hope we're able to overcome the other outstanding challenges as well. Thank you.
For your statement. I now invite Germany to deliver your statement. Germany, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I fully align with the statement of the European Union. We are living in times when multilateralism seems impossible. The bookies' bets would have been on failure to this COP. But a failure would have meant the end of some countries in this room and the loss of home, the loss of communities. This was not acceptable to us, because we will not accept that the most vulnerable are left alone in their fight against the climate crisis. This is why for us, for the European Union, for Germany, it was crystal clear we had to open a new chapter on climate finance. An approach that does not overpromise large funds, but actually delivers for those most vulnerable. And yes, $300 billion is just a starting point. We are grateful for the trust of AOSIS and LDCs, and I assure you, we will deliver. Because we learned from our mistakes in the past, we cannot sign a check that will bounce. This is also about trust. And yes, we believe that for those suffering the most from the climate crisis, while causing it the least, it is crucial to open up the donor base. So we also invited those, and underline those, who have achieved great growth over the last decades in wealth and emissions to step up. And frankly speaking, I was a bit surprised to hear some argue that voluntarily opening the donor base to include some of the richest fossil fuel powers in the world should be to the detriment of the poorest. For the EU, it's crystal clear. Nobody forgot about our historical responsibilities. And as a member of a younger generation here in the room, it is also clear. We cannot tackle the challenges of the future only with the solutions of the past. We know what our decisions today won't alone be enough to meet all the needs. This is why we got behind the vision of scaling up finance for developing countries to $1.3 trillion and a roadmap to help us make this reality. And this is also why we are so clear. Climate finance and progress in mitigation cannot and must not be separated. Without concrete measures to keep the 1.5 degrees path within reach, no money in the world will save us. We, like many others, especially ILUC, worked to go a lot further to implement the goals we set ourselves in Dubai on mitigation. Not only confirming the exits from fossil fuels, but taking concrete action to make this possible. To come as close as possible to the 1.5 degree pathway, but also to realize the chances of green transformation for all, especially the least developed countries. Because climate justice means that the opportunities coming from this transformation are not unfairly distributed again. And yes, that's why we do not only feel you, AOSIS and LDCs, but we will continue to work for more on our road to Belém. Because, as the African group said, our agreement here tonight is not enough due to resistance from a few. But let's be also very clear, Those who have come here to prevent progress and to weaken our multilateral UN system altogether have failed badly. And those who believe in a better world have won. To have achieved this in these shaky times, where we need our UN system and rules-based international order more than ever as a protection for smaller and vulnerable countries, this is a success. A success on our way to a better world for men and women, equal in their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I invite Indonesia to deliver a statement. Indonesia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Indonesia deeply appreciates the Azerbaijan Presidency's dedications and tireless effort in guiding us toward consensus on critical agenda items. We also commend the collaborative spirit and flexibility of all parties, which have been vital to the progress achieved these negotiations. However, it is deeply disappointing that COP29 continued to lack inclusivity and adequate time for key discussion, sidelining critical voices, particularly from most vulnerable. Such neglect undermines multilateral cooperation and risks reducing this process to a hollow exercise. Even more alarming is the persistent lack of ambition and commitment from developed countries. The world is watching, and failure is not an option. We must ensure every voice shapes our collective path to urgent climate actions. Indonesia believes that NCQG should covering climate finance from 2025 to 2035, prioritizing public funding through grants and equivalents from developed countries, with quantum numbers reflecting the need of developing countries. It should address mitigations, adaptations, loss and damage, and just transition with affordable financing for developing countries. To ensure transparency, we propose the Standing Committee on Finance deliver annual reports on NCQG progress, incorporating both quantitative and qualitative elements. Regarding commitment to national and global goals, Indonesia remains committed to achieving its NDCs and advancing toward net zero emissions. However, these ambitions depend on substantial financial and technical support from developed countries. On mitigations work program, Indonesia welcomed the text. Effective mitigations require not only alignment with the 1.5-degree target, but also strengthened means of implementations through concrete and accessible support. This dual approach enables higher ambitions globally. Detailed clarity on the digital platform's operations, sustainability, and inclusivity is crucial to ensuring its effectiveness. On just transition, Indonesia supports the inclusions of Article 3, Paragraph 5 of the Convention, reflecting a shared principle. We urge retaining references to the dual challenges and opportunities of sustainable development and poverty eradications in the low-emission transitions. Aligning with G77 plus China, we advocate balanced language that acknowledge all energy sources and promote fairness for developing nations through just partnership and collaborative approaches. On global stocktake, Indonesia is concerned about the recent GST development but remains hopeful for the inclusive shown in Baku to guide future decisions. The GST process must stay party-driven, uphold equity and CBDRRC, and rely on robust scientific inputs. We urge parties to resolve issues on placeholder on the key messages and substantive element on the GST report. On adaptations, we welcome the reaffirmations of the global goal on adaptation as a permanent agenda items and the adoption of the Baku adaptation roadmap, which strengthen the global adaptations agenda. On loss and damage, we support the decisions to provide further guidance for the fund for responding to loss and damage and urge the swift conversion of pledges by developed countries into an actionable commitment. Looking ahead, we are committed to engaging the comprehensive review of the WIM next year to enhance its effectiveness within the evolving architecture for addressing loss and damage. On gender and climate actions, Indonesia emphasizes the critical role of gender and age disaggregated data in crafting effective climate policies. We affirm our commitment to gender equality in climate action and adapting them in accordance to national context. On ocean, Indonesia affirms the importance of the ocean and climate change dialogue and invite parties to take into account ocean-relevant outcome of the global stocktake into the preparations of upcoming national determined contributions, noting both the role of sustainable ocean-based action in mitigation and the vital intersections of ocean and coastal climate issues in adaptations policy planning. In closing, Indonesia hopes the collaborative and inclusive spirit evident in this discussion will propel us forward. Let us act with heart, urgency, equity, and unity to secure a sustainable and resilient future for all. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite France to make a statement. France, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, Mr. Executive Secretary, ladies and gentlemen. Despite the climate emergency, which manifests itself to us in all countries regularly, with the tragic consequences that are costly in terms of human lives and material destructions, and which should bring us together to bring down the emission of greenhouse gases, the negotiations during this COP were difficult. While COP29 was a COP centered on finance and carbon trade, other important decisions were to be taken, especially on mitigation. We are very disappointed by the lack of willingness of several parties to work on the UAE consensus and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as possible. It is, however, crucial to reach an ambitious agreement to work on the landmark measures adopted in the past. The tripling of renewable energies, the doubling of energy efficiency, and the reduction of deforestation. Instead of these goals, the documents that we have adopted have postponed these to the next year for most of them, and that is a failure. We have also discussed transverse topics such as gender, and we regret that the documents do not fully reflect all these rights, in particular the empowerment of women and girls to their full extent. It is crucial to take climate action which includes gender and which is based on human rights. On the new finance goals, we have agreed to a significant amount of $300 billion by 2025 and accepting $1.3 trillion for developing countries with all stakeholders. We would like to assure the international community of our support for climate action in developing countries, in particular the least developed countries and the small island developing states. France will pursue its commitment to working on climate. 7.2 billion were earmarked by France in 2023, and we contribute 10% of the adaptation finance worldwide. As the third leading contributor to climate action, France will continue to live up to its commitments and have as guidance the priorities of the Paris Agreement for the planet. We welcome the spirit of willingness of other new states to contribute on a voluntary basis and to work to develop new coalitions to develop innovative sources of financing. Mr. President, today
we have set the date for the Belém COP30. We must live up to our duty to reduce emissions. Brazil can count on France. We will continue our work with our partners to prepare for the next cycle of national contributions to reduce emissions, which will allow us to reach carbon neutrality. Any effective response to the climate emergency must be multilateral. And in this context, agreements on finance and on Article 6 of the Paris Agreement are encouraging and will allow us to put the world on the right trajectory to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I now invite Turkey to make a statement. Turkey, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I would like to thank the government and people of Azerbaijan who hosted us in this beautiful city for 2 weeks with a magnificent organization, and the COP29 presidency for their leadership and efforts. During this period, all parties gathered in Baku to accelerate effective climate action. I would also like to thank all parties for their devoted work at the political and technical level on the issues under the agenda. We all knew that this conference of parties, whose main theme was a new finance goal, would be difficult. We sent an important message to the world by successfully completing such a difficult agenda within the framework of transparency and inclusiveness. It's very important that the decisions taken under finance are implemented in a way that strengthens the mitigation ambition and makes us all more resilient against the adverse effects of climate change. We are pleased with the agreement reached under Article 6. As Turkey, we attach importance to the inclusive and effective functioning of the mechanisms under the Paris Agreement. The progress made under the global goals on adaptation is also a remarkable success. Dear delegates, as Turkey, we strive to take the steps that are required of us with a vision that accelerates, facilitates and includes all parties in climate action. Turkey is a bridge between developed and developing countries, not only in terms of its geopolitical position, but also in terms of its socioeconomic aspects. I would like to share my belief that this special position of ours will play a conciliatory and converging role between the global north and south in COP31, which we are a candidate to host, and we expect your support for our COP31 candidacy. On the other, Turkey will continue to do its part to advance climate action in this COP and in future. On the other hand, I would like to conclude my remarks by stating that permanent peace in the Middle East and peace in the world will not be possible without a just solution to the attacks targeting innocent people in Gaza, which we see as a matter of humanity and justice. Thank you.
Fiji, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Fiji delivers this statement on behalf of the Friends of the Ocean and Climate and is joined in this statement by the African Group of Negotiators on Climate Change and its 54 member states, the Alliance of Small Island States and its 39 member states, Australia, Canada, Chile, the European Union and its 27 member states, Indonesia, Monaco, Norway, the United Kingdom and the United States. Mr. President, Excellencies and colleagues, the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change shows that it is unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, ocean and land. Widespread and rapid changes in the atmosphere, ocean, cryosphere and biosphere have occurred. Every increment of global warming will intensify multiple and concurrent hazards. Adaptation solutions implemented at appropriate scales when combined with ambitious and urgent mitigation measures can meaningfully reduce impacts, and some future changes are unavoidable and/or irreversible, but can be limited by deep, rapid and sustained global greenhouse gas emission reduction. On the occasion of COP29, we, the Friends of the Ocean and Climate, note with grave concern the adverse and widespread impacts of the global climate crisis on the ocean and its ecosystem, reaffirm our steadfast commitment to promoting the ocean climate nexus at the UN Climate Change Conference and utilizing sustainable ocean-based mitigation and adaptation actions that protect the integrity of all ecosystems in accordance with the best available science. We also affirm the importance of the ocean and climate change dialogue, highlight the key messages from the informal summary reports of 2023 and 2024 as important considerations for future actions, and commend the co-facilitators for their leadership. We note the importance and urgency of finance for mitigation and adaptation activities that support sustainable ocean-based climate action to achieve the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement, including for developing countries, in particular SIDS and LDCs, and acknowledge the critical role and traditional knowledge of indigenous people as well as local communities as stewards of nature and of all women and young people, and the importance of their full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership in planning, designing, and implementing ocean-based climate action that protects the integrity of all ecosystems. Together, we can align efforts to safeguard ocean and coastal communities and ecosystems and our collective future. Vinava Levu, and thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to China, speaking on behalf of BASIC. China, the floor is yours.
尊敬的巴巴耶夫主席。
Your Excellency, Mr. Babayev, dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to thank the Presidency team for their hard work day and night. I thank the Secretariat and the coordinator of various agenda items for their efforts for advancing the negotiations. I thank all the supporting staff of the COP for their contribution. I thank Baku. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the entry into force of the Convention. The governance process of the Climate Convention over the past 30 years has stood the test of time. Although not a smooth sailing, it has always been striving forward. We're in a community of shared future. Facing the climate change, we have to show solidarity in common response. We have taken note of the NCQD outcome. The developed countries' commitment in finance are far from the needs of the developing countries. The finance obligations of the developed countries should be further specified. Dear colleagues, January 2025 marks the 80th anniversary of the founding of the UN and the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Standing at a new historical juncture, all parties need to stay true to their original aspiration and forge ahead. We should work on the basis of Paris Agreement rather than backtracking. The key to addressing the global climate crisis is to uphold multilateralism, work together, honor our commitments, and achieve a mutually beneficial cooperation. China is a responsible developing country. No matter how the international situation changes, China will be firm in working with all parties to promote the multilateral process and international cooperation on climate change. China will continue to implement the national strategy of climate change, implement the goals of carbon peak and carbon neutrality, carry out extensive South-South cooperation on climate change, and provide assistance to other developing countries in their response measures to the best of our ability, and contribute to global green, low-carbon, and climate-resilient sustainable development. Let us work together towards the vision of Convention and the Paris Agreement, and jointly build a clean and beautiful world. Thank you, President.
Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Canada to make a statement. Canada, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Canada came to COP29 determined to strengthen global efforts to fight climate change. We were proud to come here to Baku with a diverse delegation that included Indigenous peoples, workers, youth, and civil society leaders. We came to learn, to listen, to work with others, and to secure strong outcomes. Because we see the worsening impacts of climate change in all of our countries. We came to COP29 with high expectations to build on the outcomes we agreed on in Dubai. We came here to translate our GST commitments into meaningful action. and we remain determined to work with partners to continue taking concrete steps. Mr. President, back home, what our citizens demand is that we drive down greenhouse gas emissions. In that context, we need to finalize ambitious NDCs in 2025 and take immediate and concrete steps to turn our NDCs into action. It also means we need to address mitigation here in this forum. We need to demonstrate to the world that we are credible and we are determined. On finance, Canada welcomes the important steps forward we've achieved here. Canada sees today's result as an opportunity to listen, to partner, and to act. Because for us, the goal is not just what we adopt on paper, but how we deliver upon our commitments. We know we have important work to do. And we know we can do better in unlocking new sources of finance and more transparent private sector mobilization. We know that funding needs to be available and accessible to those who need it most. There were other key outcomes that we cannot lose sight of. Together, we adopted a renewed program of work on gender. We have adopted the Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. We finalized tools to ensure the transparency and integrity of international carbon markets. We are, however, disappointed that we did not adopt a decision to shape the work on just transition and cement the importance of human rights and labor rights as we transition our societies and our economies. Before closing, Mr. President, I do want to thank you, the Presidency, your team, the UN Secretariat, and all the workers and volunteers who worked very long hours in support of COP29. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Norway to make a statement. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I give the word to our youth delegate, Amalia Holmefjord.
27 million children suffered from hunger as a result of extreme weather events in 2022. In only 50 years, human activities have caused 2/3 of the world's wildlife population to disappear. I'm afraid of what the coming 50 years will bring. In Paris, you promised us to act, but since then, emissions have kept rising, and the consequences have only gotten worse. The new finance goal that we adopted today is not even close to reflecting the deadly impacts of the climate crisis, faced primarily by developing countries on the front lines. Today, we are recklessly speeding towards disastrous ecological tipping points. There is no time for dangerous distractions, and there are no excuses left. We need an urgent scaling up of climate finance, and we must stop funding climate destruction. The existential threat of climate change affects a world that is already suffering from extreme economic inequality. When responding to the climate crisis, we must do so while embracing the principles of solidarity and justice. Countries like ours need to take the lead. Although we, the youth, would have liked to see a finance goal in line with the needs and the science at least $1 trillion annually, this is still a tripling of the ambitions. Now we need to hold our countries responsible. All provider countries should go home and at least triple their climate finance immediately. Sami activist Ella Marie Isaksen has many times stressed that every environmental win is temporary and every loss is forever. We cannot afford to lose this fight, and forever is approaching quickly. I'm too disappointed to say I believe in you, so instead I will say we depend on you. Thank you.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to Iraq to make a statement. Iraq, this floor is yours.
Thank you, President. At the outset, we'd like to express our thanks and gratitude for the excellent efforts that Azerbaijan has put forward in hosting COP29, and we'd like to thank all of the delegations that have put in the efforts to ensure that we follow up on the Paris Agreement, and we associate ourselves with the Saudi statement in the name of the Arab group and the statement of the G77 and China. Iraq is eager to ensure a balance between climate action and development, and building capacity and technological transfer in such a way as to ensure sustainable development for all within the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. And we wanted for the NCQG to take into account the technological transfer, capacity building, and also making sure that the developed nations are there to support the developing countries and to ensure that this is all incorporated as part of the NCQG. We welcome the efforts regarding the loss and damage, but we want for the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities based on the capabilities of each nation to be upheld. This is as important as the need to support the NDCs for countries as well as other national documents. And the future NDCs will have to have a national character and to respond to the specific contexts and conditions of nations. We'd like to insist here that the outcomes of the UAE dialogue is important for our work towards achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement. We would like the use of energy to be safe and to work in favor of sustainable development. We need to work collectively to ensure that there's a transition to sustainable development without a negative impact on the most vulnerable in society and without hurting our efforts to eradicate poverty. We would like to insist also on the importance of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement in their affirmation of common but differentiated responsibilities. When it comes to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement, we affirmed the importance of new rules and guidelines and working with carbon bonds in the carbon markets. There is indeed a clear importance for dedicated funds to ensure that the negative impact is contained, especially for developing countries. We have to affirm here that the mitigation work program that we agreed on in the UAE is conducive to achieving those goals, especially when aligned with damage and loss. There are countries and communities that are being subjected to biodiversity loss, and the impact is also felt among other vulnerable groups within society, including the elderly and persons with disabilities and others. We need to work together to counter the repercussions of climate change based on the common but differentiated responsibilities. We'd like to thank the UNFCCC Secretariat for all the efforts to convene this COP in addition to the Presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to the United Republic of Tanzania to make a statement. Tanzania, you have the floor.
Madam President, my delegation associates the statement made by Kenya on behalf of Africa, Uganda on behalf of G7 and China, Malawi on behalf of LDCs. Madam President, we came here with huge expectation on the climate finance. While we have made some progress on some items, we must acknowledge the challenge. We must acknowledge the challenge remaining ahead of us. For instance, Tanzania requires 19.2 billion for implementation of INDCs. The cost will rise as time goes on. This demonstrates the need for ambitious and scaled-up provision of finance with clear responsibilities for developed countries. On carbon market, the United Republic of Tanzania commends the huge milestones on Article 6 under the Paris Agreement. And we are looking forward to participating in both market and non-market approaches as well as voluntary markets. For a functional and credible participation in this mechanism, we need additional capacity building. And we are open for cooperation with other parties and the market players on implementation of this decision. Madam President, While we acknowledge progress made on gender, we insist on the need for clear mandates on the financing of the Lima work program. We are also concerned with increasing introduction of new concepts that are not in consistency with climate change, hence end up stalling the progress on the negotiation. On just transition, Madam President, just transition remains an important agenda for Tanzania, and it must include promotion of transition to clean cooking. Madam President, as we welcome the progress on full authorization of the Loss and Damage Fund, we also commend the dialogue on mountains and climate change. Tanzania harbors the world's highest freestanding mountain, Mountain Kilimanjaro, which is one of the pieces of the evidence on how mountains and their ecosystem are impacted by climate change. We call upon relevant work programs and the constitutional bodies under the Convention to integrate mountain-based action into the existing mandates and the work plan. Madam President, as we live back, let us scale forward the speed of cooperation, partnership, and urgency. Let us remember that our action today will shape the reality of now and tomorrow. We must act with ambition, guided by science, adequate allocation of resources, and driven by moral imperative to protect our planet for current and future generations. To end up my statement, I extend my deepest gratitude to the government and the people of Azerbaijan for their warm and hospitality, and to all delegates for their tireless efforts. I welcome you all to the United Republic of Tanzania, the land of Kilimanjaro, Serengeti, and Zanzibar. Together we can, and we must rise to the challenge of our time. I thank you, Madam President.
Thank you for your statement. I now open the floor for statements from the observer organisations. Please limit your intervention to 2 minutes. I now give the floor to the representatives of ENGO, a constituency of environmental non-government organisations. You have the floor.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of ENGO CAN, ENGO DCJ, TANGO, and WGC. We refuse to make an official statement and contribute to this sham of a process. We will not be complicit in the failure of COP that turned from Conference of Parties into a Conference of Developed Countries. We refuse to bring more legitimacy to a system that has collectively failed all of us for the benefit of you. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to a representative from Demand Climate Justice. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I make this again on behalf of ENGO CAN, ENGO DCJ, TANGO, and WGC. We refuse to make an official statement and contribute to this sham of a process. We will not be complicit in the failure of COP that turned from the Conference of Parties into a Conference of Developed Countries. We refuse to bring more legitimacy to a system that has collectively failed all of us for the benefit of few.
Thank you. I give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of indigenous peoples' organizations. You have the floor.
Dagote, Madam President and parties, indigenous peoples from the 7 socio-cultural regions wish to condemn the unethical methods and even more unethical outcomes this COP has produced. There is nothing to celebrate here today. As peoples, as sovereign nations, we join the several other nations that have voiced their vehement objections to these unacceptable decisions that are continuing to destroy our planet. We support the CSOs who have chosen to use silence to refuse to give legitimacy to this sham of a process, but we have an obligation to speak and hold our place as rights holders in this space and ensure our disappointment is put on record. It is unacceptable that human rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples were removed from NCQG and instead prioritize carbon market financing, which profoundly harms Indigenous peoples. While we urgently need direct and equitable access to climate finance for adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage across all 7 sociocultural regions, we reiterate that we reject the financial colonization that comes from loans and any other financial mechanisms that perpetuate indebtedness of nations who have contributed the least to climate change yet bear the brunt of its tragedies. Our lands, waters, ice, and territories are melting and burning. Our peoples are suffering. We no longer wait. Expecting us to be grateful for $300 billion by 2035 is expecting us to be grateful for you profiting off our preventable deaths. There is no just transition without the rights of Indigenous peoples being fully upheld. All adaptation and just transition actions must recognize us as the crucial and equal partners, the rights holders that we are. The knowledge systems of Indigenous peoples, our worldviews, practices, and sciences are distinct and provide a vital basis for effective adaptation strategies for climate change. Unlike the false solutions being proposed and even celebrated, our practices have been proven to work. Excluding our knowledge systems and worldviews from climate action risks the survival of all humanity. We all deserve better. We need parties to recommit to the 1.5-degree target, phase out fossil fuels, and transition to sustainable systems that respect human rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples. We offer you the leadership, solutions, and contributions of our communities in this collective fight for survival. Ashund.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to 2 representatives speaking on behalf of children and youth non-governmental organizations. Kindly be reminded to keep the statement to 2 minutes in total. You have the floor.
Distinguished chairs, parties, fellow observers. My name is Runi. Next to me is Mena. We are speaking on behalf of the Children and Youth Constituency, Yongo. We voluntarily disclose that we have no direct ties to fossil fuel or other emissions-intensive industries and no other conflicts of interest. Why exactly are you here? Are you proud of yourselves and what you have accomplished? Because children and youth are not. We are furious. We are devastated. Is this a joke to you? We have been waiting our entire lives for you to address this issue, and you keep dragging your feet. You have been arguing about this for so long and now have nothing to show for it. Barely agreeing on human rights. Are you serious? That should not even be up for discussion at a climate conference. The principle of just transition should guide the entire operationalization of the Paris Agreement. Our families, friends, entire countries are being sentenced to death because you don't have the guts to do what is right. Why do we have to beg you to stop having fossil fuel lobbyists in the room? Why do we have to beg you to make polluters pay up for the damage to our health, to our homes, to our planet? Why are we the one being punished, our future stolen? This deal kills the Paris Agreement. It undermines the convention. It shatters all hope. The just adopted quantum in the NCQG is not just insufficient, it is a blatant insult. NCQG needs to be anchored in gender and intergenerational equity. 300 billion is not even close to being enough. Trillions, not billions. The number finalized for what do not reflect ambition. It reflects abandonment. Additionally, the operationalization of Article 6 comes at unbearable cost. You are auctioning our future.
Promises without action are not hope, but hypocrisy. Finance must reach the most vulnerable communities with accessible pathways. What has been demonstrated by the global north in their future by addressing historical responsibility and take action for the most vulnerable is an act of betrayal. We stand by small island developing states and least developed countries, which contribute the least to this crisis but are impacted the most, and decry the actions taken by the Presidency and the Secretariat. Is this the standard you claim to represent? Being highly exclusionary and discriminatory. We support our civil society organization allies who have chosen to use silence to refuse to give legitimacy to this sham of a process. But we have an obligation to speak and hold our place as rights holder in this space and ensure our disappointment in both of record. We are incredibly disappointed when looking at the outcome, or better yet, a non-existing outcome of this COP. There can be no climate justice without gender justice and human rights. Cease fire now. Defund genocide.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor to a representative speaking on behalf of business and industry non-governmental organization. You have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to address you on behalf of the International Chamber of Commerce and the Business and Industry constituency at the closing of this COP29. We extend our sincere gratitude to the COP29 presidency and especially the young volunteers of Azerbaijan for their tremendous efforts in staging this critical COP. We also thank the parties for their unwavering commitment until the very final hours. The global business community came to this COP with clear asks for a bold, actionable Baku package to match the urgency of the climate crisis, accelerate real-world mitigation and adaptation, and deliver vital support to the most vulnerable in this global transition. A package that responds to the following clear calls. First, an ambitious outcome on mitigation that delivers and builds on the Dubai promise, and that requests all parties to come forward with bold and 1.5-aligned NDCs in the coming months, informed by the outcomes of the first global stocktake. Second, a strong set of rules that fully operationalize Article 6.2 cooperative approaches and the centralized 6.4 crediting mechanism to establish a robust framework for the cooperation among countries to implement their NDCs. Finally, and most importantly, a truly ambitious, actionable and comprehensive NCQG, one that has at its core a clear commitment to provide public finance that responds to the needs and priorities of developing and climate vulnerable economies. In addition, we called for a goal that can be a real catalyst for the mobilization of private sector climate finance in developing economies. President, parties, these were our clear calls. While you've made some important steps forward, this is not enough, and much work remains to be done. As you prepare the next NDCs, the only push for greater mitigation ambitious outcome from last year's COP. This year, we've missed an opportunity. You must do better, and we know you can. Coming out of this COP, there's a urgent effort needed to build an enabling investment climate for private finance. The Baku to Belém roadmap will be critical in this regard. We've also heard here in Baku increasing concerns on uncoordinated national interventions that must be addressed as a priority. We would encourage a discussion on the climate and trade nexus at the next sessions. Real solutions to climate change lie in multilateral and multi-level cooperation and effective public and private partnerships. This is the only way to deliver on the Paris Agreement. The global business community stands ready to work with all parties towards Belém and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. Dear delegates, I invite the COP to consider Agenda Item 20, conclusion of the session. This brings us to the end of the conference. I sincerely thank you for all your hard work over many long hours. I wish you a safe travel home and look forward to see you again. I declare the 29th session of the COP, 19th session of the CMP and 6th session of the CMA closed.